Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining. My name is Christy Barber with Christy Barber Consulting, and I have a good friend of mine on today, David Solomon, who is a fractional chief revenue officer at SERO Growth. So, thank you so much for joining me today, David. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Christy. Really appreciate this opportunity.
So I think it's really unique what you do because you live in the numbers world like I do, and I think
Mm.
that's so fun. So if you could just start off by just sharing your journey. How did you end up where you are, and what have been some of those fun highs and low peaks along the way that have kind of formed this journey?
Thanks, Christy. And it's funny because when people ask me my journey, they're just expecting, oh, you must have done sales your whole life. Well, yeah, but I had a different bumpy road. I mean, my starting point really, I always tell everybody, is in the toy business. Had a great time. The toy business was at its one of its peaks, and we did so well in Canada. We tripled our business that they said, you're so good, we'll give you the export. What the heck? You could take that on too. Thankfully, it did not include the United States and the United Kingdom. That would have been heck. But opened 40 markets over the next few years and had a fantastic time in Europe. And like I tell everybody, I open in every continent except for Antarctica. When they have a store, maybe in Antarctica, then I'll open. And then I just spent, afterwards, leaving the toy industry, I spent, years in the newspaper industry, technology, all about new market growth, new market opportunity, and sandwiched in between, Christy, I did what no sane person should do: walk away from a good career and go back to school at 42 to get a full-time MBA. But which led me, though, by accident, to become a lecturer at the MBA level and the Masters of Retail Management level, teaching what I do, which is essentially how to grow businesses. And so I'm having that's my journey all the way, very quickly.
Yeah. No, I think it's fun. It's always those moments where you're like, "Hey, let's just stop, pivot, change everything up and go." I mean, similar in some of my journey of just like stopping working in the corporate world and going out on my own, and it's that leap of faith in those moments where it doesn't totally make sense to everybody around you except sometimes to yourself maybe.
Well, it's funny because when I walked away, I married three young teenagers, and people are like, "Are you nuts?" And I'm like, "Yeah, certifiable, but
Mhm.
it was a great experience, and I wish everybody could go through something like what you and I did, was basically hit reboot.
Mhm.
It's so cool."
It really is, and I think sometimes doing that a little bit later in life, you have a very different perspective that you bring to the table, and you know a little bit more clearly who you are and where you wanna go.
Yeah, and I have an older son who did his MBA, and we compared notes, and he looked at me and he said, I wish I could have waited like you, maybe a little bit longer. And I said, and it's funny because I wish I would have done it sooner like you, because it's very different which perspective you got it. But
Yeah.
no, absolutely. It just the opportunity to walk away, clear your mind, and get a new perspective, especially when you have a little bit of experience or white hair in my case, it was worthwhile.
Yeah. No, I think that's awesome. So I'd ask you, kind of share a little bit about your company, like who Zero is, who you help. Yeah.
Sure. So Zero Growth was found as an idea, and it's a kind of a play on the CRO, like where the S and the E replace the C, because I'm not just the chief, but it's also we do the strategy and the execution. So essentially, my company, what I do is I work with manufacturers, anybody who deals in some sort of tangible good. If you never exported, or you have exported and you've had a really bad experience, or you have exported but you don't know where to go next, that's where I get the phone call. I help those companies discover that new market expansion. We research the market effectively. We come up with the go to market strategy, and we help them to roll it out. Because today, markets around the world, confusion, uncertainty, where to go, how to go, Christy. We help clear that all up for our clients, no matter where they are in the world and no matter where they want to go in the world.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of confusion in the market, and easy
Mhm.
even when you come down to the smaller the SMB world too, of you don't know what you don't know when you're first starting out.
Mm.
And how do you help gauge, I guess not gauge, but necessarily help the SMB world when they're moving in that direction, because they're learning as they go as well.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, first of all, there are a few myths, and one of the big myths is I'm too small to export.
Mhm.
No, not necessarily. You might have a great product, that somebody wants somewhere, and you don't even realize it. But we're caught up in the, oh, everything's about price. And when
Mhm.
you do the homework, you realize, no, it's not always about price. Something you're providing can be very exceptional. The issue is when you're running your business, Christy, day to day, and you've seen it, I'm sure, in your world and my world, we don't see the trees through the forest. We don't see what problems we solve for the clients. We don't see how they cherish and love what we do. And then you don't realize you could take exactly that model to another market without having to invest in salespeople, without having to invest in more product. But what you currently do is so good. If I could take it somewhere else, now I experience that great growth, that great opportunity, but I don't have the time. I don't have the resources to do it. And that's really what I've been doing with clients like you, Christy. You demystify some of the stuff because
Mhm.
there's no time. When I come into a company and I say, yes, you can, it's because we've discovered there is something sweet. Let's go bring it to this market. Not necessarily
Mhm.
the biggest market, not necessarily the most complicated market, but the opportunity for businesses to kind of ease their way into that new market experience as well. And then once they taste that, they don't want to stop.
No, they don't. It's a totally different world for them in that respect. I would say, what have you seen that is when somebody's getting into the exporting side, what are maybe the top 2 things that they need to be aware of?
Well, first things first is like they fall into two buckets, and I'm going to answer your question. It's going to come a little bit weird the way I'm going to say it. It says we have two types of business owners in general. We have the tortoise and we have the hare. The
Mhm.
tortoise is the one who spends way too much time analyzing, overanalyzing, and finding reasons not to export. My sales team cannot. I don't have the time. Da 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 da.
Mhm.
Obstacle, 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 obstacle. Now the hare, the opposite, where they rushed, they went to a trade show, they met somebody, they fell in love. It's almost like speed dating. They fell in love with the distributor. That person's going to solve all of my export problems, only to realize that we didn't do the right due diligence and that business absolutely drained resources, time, money, opportunity, and hurt ourselves. So what I tell everybody is you need to be a hybrid. You need to analyze smartly, but you got to move quickly. And so like there's this kind of like, wait a minute, you just told me to slow down, but you told me to move quickly. Do your homework. It's like the whole hire slow, fire fast.
Yep.
Do your homework slowly, but move fast because the competition will be there, things will change, and if you have to pivot, you got to make the right move. So those are the kinds of things I share with everybody.
Yeah. No, it's good because it is that way. It's such a competitive market these days. And if you're not strong and keeping, in front of everybody, somebody's going to come in and steal your place.
And even in your home market, if you're not
Yeah.
careful, there's a competitor who wants to come and take away your market share, take away your business, and that's also an impetus to go out, because what ends up happening, Christy, is when you go international or when you go outside your home market, if your home market there's a recession, an economic challenge, one of your biggest clients goes under, and it happens
Mhm.
to all of us. When you diversify, now that impact is minimized and you actually can offset some of your losses in that new market because there might be bigger, better clients. So there are a lot of upsides, not just new sales. There's a
Yeah.
lot of upsides in looking at new market opportunities.
Mhm. Do you have a certain way that you help people and when they're looking in those new markets and what might be an emerging market that they should go into?
Well, the first thing is like what I want to understand is what problem do they solve?
Mhm.
It's not what you sell. It's what are you solving? Because when we sit with your clients, and this is what we do anecdotally, is we sit with the clients and say, we think we do this for you. What do we really do for you? And then how do we do it? What unique offer that we have, you know, chat it goes, helps you with that.
Yeah.
Now I have an idea. Now, obviously, I want to know my ideal customer and so on. Now I know where to go. Now I know how to take this from here to bring it to here. I want to find a market that wants what I have the way I have it. That's the first market. I almost always suggest to people, don't reinvent the wheel. Take what you do super well in your home market and bring it to that first market. Once you get the taste, once you understand exporting, once you understand that, man, you could start playing a little here,
Mhm.
a little bit there. But why break the mold? If the mold works, it really, really works. Don't reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, and I think people get caught up in that. I know entrepreneurs sometimes too, because they wanna chase something new, and it's like, "Let's just go," and it goes back to that point of moving too quickly with no research.
Well, chasing the shiny penny has
Yeah.
been forever, and
Mhm.
I'm guilty of it
Oh,
myself,
same.
and I'll tell you, but what I've realized is that not every market is for me. Not
Mhm.
every market's an opportunity, and bigger doesn't mean better. Bigger tends to be more competitive.
Yep.
So, I posted this on LinkedIn last week and I got these crazy reactions. I said, "Hey, rather than go to the UK, have you ever thought of Poland?" And they were like, "Are you nuts?" And I'm like, "Why not?"
Yeah.
And then there's that pause and like, I don't know. We're used to hearing the same names
Mhm.
over and over again. And this world today, the markets have emerged, things have changed. 20 years, a lot of markets in Eastern Europe, Asia, even parts of Africa, South America, super attractive and doesn't have the same pains as going into those traditional big markets.
Yeah.
Got to explore it all,
Mhm.
got to see the opportunities.
It
Nowadays, there's no excuse not to look at it all.
No, there's not, and I think people get fearful because it's, "Oh, I haven't nobody's ever really talked about this. I don't know if that's right." And just because it's unfamiliar doesn't mean that it's wrong.
Well, and our problem is our media doesn't do a very good,
No.
good job. I mean, if I'll give you an example, and I don't want to give CNN all the kudos, but when you go internationally, when you go traveling, CNN talks to you about South America, Africa, Middle East, Asia, Australia.
Mhm.
We don't talk about that in North America or the US and Canada until there's a problem. Oh, there's something wrong with the royal family. Let's talk about
Mhm.
England. Oh no, there was an earthquake in Japan. Oh, let's go talk about Japan. But we don't know enough about these markets. And so when they come with their missions, we're kind of like, who are these strangers?
Yeah.
I don't know who they are. Today there should be no excuses. There
Mhm.
really is. And we need to get away from conventional, traditional and look for what's right for your company.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think too so much of that, and I've seen even when people go overseas and they're finding manufacturers and things like that, they're all going to the same
Yep.
same places for that as well, not just selling, but also going to those same types of vendors. Well, my buddy told me he uses this guy, I'm going to use the same guy,
Right.
but there might be this hidden gem somewhere else. Like you just got to do that research and find it.
And China is no longer just the only market. You
No,
have
it's not.
You have Bangladesh, you have India, you have all these markets now. I know tariffs tend to get in the way and this and that, but Mexico, other
Mhm.
markets have really emerged as opportunities. But like you said, even from an import or export. Now, I'm not an import specialist, and I won't tell
Yeah.
everybody, "Oh, listen to me," but it's the same conversation that your suppliers and your clients may not be where you think they are. And
Mhm.
it's time to look outside of that. And you know what? The US government, the Canadian government, a lot of governments are very helpful in that way, but they don't publicize it. They don't tell you, "Oh, we can help you here
Mhm.
and here and here and here." You got to go ask them. But I would sit down with, your export development organizations and say, "Where is the opportunity for me? Where are the opportunities?" And not just from a client perspective, but also from a funding perspective, a
Yep.
government grants perspective. Christy, you're in the numbers more than I am, but financially, if I go into market A, can I get financial support? And all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, there's all this opportunity I didn't know existed.
Mhm. And it's just looking, and it goes back to that too, because I had a client the other day that is looking into some grants and didn't even know what was possible because it
Sure.
was somebody just told her in passing, "Hey, have you ever thought about getting a grant for your business?" And she's like, "Well, no, because I don't do anything extraordinary."
And that's the mistake is we
It
believe
is.
we need to be super unique. The
Mhm.
reality is your accountant, your CFO, should advise you. And Christy, I'm sure you're doing a fantastic
Mhm.
job with your clients, but many accountants don't do that. And many financial advisors are not helping. The banks are not helping. And we need to do our own homework. And it's all out there. I mean, go search government grant, export,
Yep.
or whatever it is, and you'd be amazed what could be out there from your state, from the federal government, or even in Canada, the provincial governments give a ton of money to companies to export. And even when you do go into another market, if you open up a sales office, in all likelihood, you probably do not get financing. But
Right.
if you really open up something a little more elaborate, those countries want to invest in you because you're investing in them. So
Mhm.
opportunities are there. We just got to find them.
Yeah. And I even saw that I worked with a client last year. They're out of Hong Kong, but they moved headquarters to Singapore because there are all these
Mhm.
grants that were offered.
Yep.
And so it helped them. And there's all these things out there if you are diligent enough to do the research. Yeah, and you can find it.
100%. And
Yeah.
we just, and this is really where I come into play a lot, Christy. Like you'll come in from the maybe the financial side of it, but I come in from the strategic planning part of it, is to say, yes, if we're going to go here, look what we could try to get from the
Mhm.
government. Look what we could try to do. Some governments will even give you money to go to trade shows. Some governments will give you money for travel and new marketing opportunities. You just have to find it, but that's all part and parcel of the whole plan,
Yeah.
and not to base that your whole export is going to be if the government will give you a $50,000 grant. Not necessarily, but boy, does it help.
It does. So another question for you, when you look at the companies that you help, what do you see as kind of one of the common real challenges? Is it a lack of strategy? Is it execution or just like alignment in the teams? What do you normally see?
All of the above.
All of the
I
above.
think the hardest part is that a lot of organizations where the failure tends to lie, or where the biggest struggle tends to lie, is, like you said, the organizational alignment.
Mhm.
And I liken it to a football team. There are 11 players on the offensive line and on the defensive line. And you call the play, and everybody needs to know where to go. Everybody needs to follow. And the quarterback, the CEO, calls the play and makes it happen. And everybody understands and is aligned, and we practice and we go there. Same in business. You
Yeah.
have 11 departments, you have 11 different people who have to be involved, and everybody needs to align. And it takes one player or one leader in an organization to make it difficult. And so without that alignment, which includes strategic, forward thinking, growth thinking, if you are not right for the table, you
Mhm.
as the CEO and the founder, you might want to think of finding somebody else. Not because that person isn't loyal, not because that person isn't good, but they're not strategic for what you need. And so maybe they need to be in a different role, but you need people who can think growth as you
Mhm.
scale. The people who got you there could be fantastic, but can they take you to the next level?
Yeah.
That's the challenge.
It is, and I think people get caught up in, well, that was my first hire. They helped me get to this point, and you get some
Yeah.
of this, I know, like guilt that comes in if you have to replace them to get somebody that can take you to the next level.
And it's crazy because I'd liken it to a diet. When you think about it, it's on you, right? You know what the
Mhm.
strategy is. I'm going to eat this. I'm going to work out this many times. I'm going to not do this, and I'm going to do that. And then when you execute, at the end of the week, you go, wow, well, I snacked here and I had a great ice cream there and I
Right?
didn't really exercise and whatever. Think of your business now, 11 people doing that.
Mhm.
And if one person doesn't help you, then all that work, all that effort, there's a bump, there's a
Yeah.
problem, there's a challenge. And so you want everybody in line, rowing together. If you ever seen a rowing team in the Olympics, right? They're all rowing together in a proper cadence and they're making it to the finish line first.
Mhm.
Isn't that where you want to be? Well,
Yeah.
you need the right people then rowing with you.
Yeah, and you can't feel it, and it I guess too, it's just then reshuffling folks around, and then sometimes they just don't last with you a long time, and it's time to exit, and that's okay. And I think people take things almost too personally at times when it does come to that, because you get to be kind of family friends in those smaller settings, and then when it's time to grow, they just can't always go with you.
And the truth of the matter is, it's not about if we make it personal, we'll never. It becomes very painful.
Yes, it
Strategic
does.
thinking, strategic execution, if you will,
Mhm.
it's just not something that we're taught from day one. And some people are really, really good at executing.
Yeah.
You give them a plan and they can roll it out no problem. They can figure out where the problems are, they can fix the problems, whatever. But when you think of that next level, that's not their superpower. That's not
Mhm.
bad
Yeah.
because they're doers. They may not be planners. And so you need that balance at the table. You need someone who can look at, Christy, as a CFO, you've seen, you're not just you're not just a bookkeeper, you're not just an accountant. You see strategy, you understand the business, you can understand the next steps. That's why your controller is not necessarily the person you want at the strategic table. Not
Yeah.
because they're bad, it's because they just don't have what's needed to take the company to the next level. And
Hmm.
that's not a bad thing. That's just a reality of where you are in your business life.
Yeah. And I think that even starts out with founders of companies. Some of them, they have this phenomenal idea, but they're not the CEO type
Right.
person with the vision.
Right.
And pride can get in the way and all of these things because they want the title, not necessarily that they can take the company to where it needs to go.
Listen, I experienced that in my career where I had a CEO who was really upset. He thought he had to have all the answers. He thought he would have to be the genius behind it.
Hmm.
And when we met and we started talking, I started asking him some strategic questions, and he kind of looked at me uncertain how to answer. We didn't get along because he thought I was undermining him. I was showing him up, and I'm not the
You're
right
like,
one for
no.
you. You're not the right one
Yeah.
for me, and we call it a day. Where I work with organizations today is I sit with the owner or the founder, the CEO, whatever, and we have a very in-depth conversation about the leadership team. Do
Hmm.
you have the right players? Do you have the right mindset?
Yeah.
And if not, you could have the greatest product in the world. But if you don't have the right people to help you to bring you to the next level, as I said, it'll be harder. I'm not saying
Hmm.
impossible, it's just gonna be much harder. And sometimes, yeah, that difficult decision of, yeah, that person's been with me for 10 years. I need somebody else.
Hmm.
Um, and if that person is really loyal and understands, they'll want to be there with you. They'll want to go with you forward, and they'll understand, yep, you need someone better than me or different talent than I have to take you to that next level.
Yeah. And it goes back to your boat analogy. If you have everybody in there trying to row a different direction, you're just going in circles and nothing's
Absolutely.
going to happen. Yeah. Or eventually your good people will leave because they become frustrated, and then you're not, you got to kind of start over with building a team.
And that's something you don't want to do is
No.
you want the right talent at the table. And if somebody leaves because they're upset, I mean, look, people will leave for a variety of reasons, and I don't hold people back. But at some point, when you have the right person at the table, you don't want to lose that person.
No.
And so you might have to look around the table and go, to keep them, I might need to do something here. But that's the way to, when you're talking about scaling, whether it's new market growth or home market growth, you want the right people at the table to work with you to take you to that next level.
Yeah. And when you're kind of looking at the strategy and it gets to that point of, all right, this becomes reality, what gaps do you see sometimes come up when they're working internally to, when you're working with these guys and you're saying, all right, here's our strategy, we're moving this way. But, sometimes people get stuck in those moments of like, I don't know, is that right? Is it not right? Where do you kind of see some of those pain points, and how do you help teams kind of get over that hurdle to say, okay, this does make sense, we're confident behind the strategy, let's go?
And it goes back to two things. I do we do a lot of research, and I know people hate the word research. It's a blah, 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 like, oh, I don't want to do research,
I
whatever.
know.
But we need to do it. And that gives us one piece of the pie. The second piece of the pie, or the puzzle, if you will, is having conversations in market with the right people.
Mhm.
And I don't mean the distributors. I'm saying associations, networking groups. You want to get a feel for where you want to go next. And do you have the right buyers? Do you have the right contacts, whatever? Because when you make that, when you're saying, okay, we're ready to sign off, let's make the move, we've got the empirical data and we've got then the qualitative data, and we're bringing that together, like saying, okay, the numbers make sense, the people make sense.
Mhm.
Okay, it's a go. And what you need to then do is look internally and saying, okay, should we hit these numbers? Do we have the inventory? Do we have the processes? Do we have the cash flow? Do we have the inventory, whatever? And no, I'm not a financial expert. That's your job, Christy. That's not me. But I have these very difficult conversations with CFOs
Yeah.
because a lot of them are gun shy and saying, "Oh no, we let's go conservative." I said, "Okay,
Mhm.
however, what ifs?" And there are a lot of what if conversations that we have so that they can feel comfortable. And that's why
Mhm.
I say start with a small market, because when you start with a smaller market, your shipments are smaller, your risk is smaller, your exposure is smaller, and everybody learns together how to handle that. If I'm a Canadian company trying to sell into the entire United States, which is 9 times larger than Canada, that's a big chunk.
Yeah.
Okay? And I experienced that in the toy industry where, I sold to Walmart in Canada back in the '90s. We were 130 stores. There were 2,200 in the United States. I mean, what we did in 1 year, they could have done in 1 order. I mean,
Mhm.
it's just very risky and very disruptive to organizations. So to get everybody kind of moving a little bit, that's why I say start small,
Yeah.
start with something that you can manage and learn together, and then the risks or your hunger gets like you really get hungry to get for those bigger markets.
Mhm. And I think with that too, when it comes to the financial side of things, gotta make sure there's a budget in place too
Oh,
with
hell
all of
yeah.
that expansion that's gonna
Oh, yeah.
come in, and inventory is expensive. I always talk about inventory because I think every Shark Tank episode is, "Hey, I've come in because I need funding to cover inventory. We got the orders, we just can't fulfill."
And that's the problem
Yeah.
is, and when you're a startup, you don't know,
Mhm.
okay? When you go to a new market, you almost start again like a startup, and you
Yeah.
forgot what it was like those first couple of years possibly, and now you're going and saying, "I'm a smarter startup because
Mhm.
I know how to expect and how to plan," but you gotta have those contingencies, you gotta be prepared to pivot, you gotta be prepared, and budget. Look, I work with them on the budgets, I work with them also on the KPIs, your key performance indicators, because at one point, budget is good, but if we hit our numbers and we exceed them, now what? And
Yeah.
so we want to make sure that our whether we use a distributor in market or we hire a salesperson or it's a joint venture, which is by the way part of the go-to-market
Mhm.
strategy, doesn't only mean I need a distributor, that we actually have when we look at the indicators, we're like, okay, what do we do here? Do we pivot or do we continue? Do we need to add more cash or like what do we need to do? And those are the kinds of things that you're not used to having the sales guy at the table with the financial person,
Mhm.
and we're working together. Usually we're like opposite.
Right.
Nowadays we're together. Now we have to be part of that same team that we plan together and we execute together. And that's key today. If you don't have that and goes back to the alignment, uh, you're going to create this uncertainty and then something's going to break.
Mhm. And I think that's something that's really cool to see over the last probably decade or so of there's no longer as much silos inside the department. It's more so everybody's working together.
I wanna say yes, Christy, but unfortunately, my
You still
experience has
see
been
a
I've
lot of
seen
the
way too
silos.
many, and it's funny because when I do these kind of podcasts with marketers, they wanna talk about sales and marketing, how we're still siloed, and
Yes.
I'm saying, "I want us to work together. It's
Mhm.
enough. I wanna work with operations. I wanna work with finance." And if when I go back to my toy days about 25 years ago, 30 years ago, I sat at that table. I was the only non-VP at a table with all of these department heads, and I said, "Teach me.
Yeah.
Help me to help you as sales and customer service at the time. How can I help you? And how can you teach me to be more strategic?"
Mhm.
And that's where I got my first real experience of understanding forecasting, the impact of what one major order can have an impact on an organization and so on and so forth. Um, once and sales now are finally getting to that strategic table. We're not just executing anymore. We're
Right.
now part of the thought
Mhm.
process of whether or not it's a go or no go.
Yeah. And I think it's just been kind of cool to see even with some of the companies I've worked with and people get invited into the room that never would have had an opportunity to be in there before. And I see that too, especially on the side of making decisions. And there was a book actually, I can't remember how long ago it's written. I think it's been a minute. It's called The Great Game of Business.
Okay.
And he talked about in there, they had an issue with OSHA requirements and they needed to get their numbers down, and he was rewarding the clients, hey, if we go so many days without an OSHA offense, awesome, here's the reward for all of that. But he also was one of the first that did open book, and taught everybody in the organization about what the financials meant for being a privately owned company. And I think there's a lot of power in that.
And I agree with you, and I over most of my later career, if you will, I was with the financial statements, and I
Mm.
looked at the financial statements. Yes, when I went back to school, I got a way better understanding of the
Yeah.
financial statement analysis because that's really what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
But when I spent 10 years in the technology field, and I taught one CEO in particular how to understand his cash flow statement
Yeah.
because he couldn't understand why cash flow and sales were not identical.
Mhm.
And my CFO at the time, who shouldn't have been a CFO, couldn't explain it to him. I did. And
Yeah.
he's like, "But you're a sales guy." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a sales guy, but, I need to understand the numbers because I understand that if we sell something and we only collect in 75 days, I got a problem." And so, I help the CFO institute new receivable procedures. I do that with my clients too. When the clients say, "Oh, we want to export for the first time," and I go, "Fantastic." And they
Mhm.
go, "Well, what terms should we give?" No terms.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Letter of credit, payment up front. Until you establish a relationship, there is zero terms, and that is a commonplace action. What? They don't want 60 days, they don't want 90 days. They do, but
Mhm.
you're not giving it in day one. And so I'm really what you want around the table is not somebody who's an expert in their department, but someone who can think beyond their department. And that goes back to the alignment conversation we had a second ago, as I could think of finance, operations, HR, and all other departments. I'd love someone to and this is what I teach my students as well at McGill University, is to how to think of if you may never go into sales, but I want you to understand the mindset of sales and how they think and how they work, so that when you're at the table, you can have an open conversation and be totally aligned.
Yeah, and going back to your cash flow, I've had clients in the past that it's same thing, it was a CEO that doesn't understand cash flow, and it's like, "Well, we got all this money in here, that's great, we can pay out all this," and I said, "Yeah, but your payments are coming in 45 to 60 days from now. You gotta chunk in today because it's been 45 to 60 days. That doesn't mean there's extra money in the bank to be doing all these extra things. We gotta hold on to it."
And that's key, and that's
Yeah.
what I share with my clients too,
Mm.
and I tell them, if you don't have a cash flow positive scenario, maybe you should wait on going to a new market because we could disrupt it even further. Again, conversations CEOs do not expect from the sales department. Sales is always, "Oh, you could do it, we could sell, and
Mhm.
we promise you the star, the moon, and the sky." Not with me. You're not gonna get that. I'm not sugarcoating anything.
Right.
I'm gonna tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly because that it would be irresponsible for me as a strategic partner in an organization not to warn you of those pitfalls.
Yeah.
So, if you wanna go ahead and promise and underdeliver, it's gonna hurt you. And I don't work with organizations that play like that.
Mhm. No, I agree because otherwise it's gonna be very difficult to be successful.
You're right, and at the
Yeah.
end of the day, what do we want, Christy? At the end of the day, when it's over and we're done our business careers or whatever, are we selling the business? Are
Mhm.
we giving it off as a legacy? And if we're selling it, don't we want the healthiest organization possible to get the highest multiple?
Yep.
And international export provides another multiple. It does raise the value of the organization. Ask any M&A person, they'll tell you this. They'll
Mhm.
tell you absolutely, but if you do it wrong and you're clunky, all that effort could be thrown out the window. So that's why you got to look at that whole organization. And international is one part of the global strategy. It's not the strategy. I just want to be very clear with everybody because if you're going towards an exit or you're going towards a transfer or whatever, it's we're just one piece of that whole conversation. It's not the conversation. So
Mhm.
and we're very helpful in helping business owners understand that.
Yeah. Um, do you have an example story that you could share of a kind of a conversation that changed the trajectory of a company based on people you've worked with?
Well, I'll tell you, most recently, the most difficult challenge has been the gentleman in the White House that, some people say he's not a gentleman. Like, I'm
Right.
not getting into politics here. But, in 2024, I was working with a Mexican company that wanted to come to the United States, and we were on track, on par. Everything was going to be okay. And then the uncertainty hit.
Mhm.
And as a result, the very difficult conversation was, and I said, we have a plan B. We need to execute. And there was a bit of a heated exchange. You're not trying hard enough. You're not pushing
Yeah.
hard enough. Don't they understand there's no tariffs with Mexico? I said, I can talk until I'm blue in the face. If they don't want, because there's uncertainty, there's no point in continuing to push for this. So as soon as we pivoted to Canada, bing, things started to release. It made game easier. And that's why I tell everybody, we need a plan A, but
Mhm.
we need a plan B. And part of the KPIs that I talked about is at a certain point, we need to pivot to plan B.
Yeah.
And we need to look out for these things. And unfortunately, yes, we're still keeping an eye on the US, but it's so hard right now with what's going on that now we're looking at another market. We'll look back at the United States maybe in 26, 27.
Mhm.
But Christy, the key here is, you know, don't get too emotionally attached to one
Yes.
market because you never know.
No, you don't. And that's always the hardest thing is getting rid of those feelings and being logical when making decisions.
Oh yeah, and that's the part is that you again you go to a trade show or you heard something in the news
Mhm.
or a buddy told you something and you just get emotionally attached to that. You can't
No.
because things change so fast today.
Mhm. Yeah, you gotta be able to drop it and move on to
Absolutely.
plan B or plan C or I don't know, Z sometimes because you've
Well,
gone
yeah,
down the whole
Christy,
line.
let's go back a 5, 6 short years ago. No one spoke this thing COVID. COVID, what's
Right.
COVID? Nobody knew. March 2020, you had to pivot. And
Mhm.
so I'm not suggesting we're gonna have another pandemic, God forbid. But these things happen. And if you look historically in the last 20 odd years, we've had one major international crisis after another.
Mhm.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah. And
We have
then
these,
it becomes how quickly can you pivot as well?
and that's
Some
the beauty
companies that do it well and others, they get stuck.
and that's the beauty of a small business. If you're
Mhm.
if you're if you're a large corporation, pivoting is like moving this super tanker.
Yeah.
But if you're a small company, you can move like a CD, just like boom, you can make a quick 90-degree turn, and it won't be as could be as impactful as a Microsoft or as an Apple. These guys can't pivot fast because they're too big.
Yeah.
You can as a small business, you can, but at the same time, they can afford mistakes. You can't afford many mistakes because
No.
that could be too drastic to an organization.
So question for you, what would you say to a business owner that feels like they've tried everything and nothing seems to move the needle?
You know what? Here's the thing. If you're a commodity-based business where price is your only differentiator, you're right. It's gonna be hard. You have to find something different, something to put you in a different position versus the competition. Because as a commodity product, somebody bigger than you is gonna underprice you. You're not gonna win this war. But if you have a point of differentiation and you had success, you might be looking in the wrong areas to replicate that success. You may be looking at the wrong markets. You may be talking to the wrong people. This is where we kind of help out a lot for organizations is to, take what you do super well and find somebody that wants you.
Mhm.
But also it's the method in which to go into the market. Is it a distributor? I go back to what I said a minute ago. Salesperson, joint venture, if you're more complex, you can acquire somebody. But Christy, often we rely on the same things over and over again. This is not a copy paste world.
No.
Every market has to be something a little more customized, a little bit more fine tuned. Eventually, you'll find the mojo and you'll go, okay, here's what we're going to do. But I also ask them, do you have an agreement in place? Is your intellectual property protected? You've got to cover all these bases, and then you'll see the prosperity come through.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. You got a couple questions in the chat that I think would be a
Okay,
fun one to answer here
sure.
for you. From your experience, what are the most costly mistakes manufacturers make in their first international push?
Wow. Some of the most costly mistakes is not understanding pricing. You know, did you go in? Are you underpricing? And that has a tendency to happen too.
Yeah.
Did you give away too many big discounts because you thought of, oh, if I can get only way I can get in is by, and so you create the same problem you have in your home market. But another one of those costly mistakes is not understanding the cultural differences between your home market and where you're going. And that mistake is, if you go, for example, I'll take Mexico as a great example. I joke with people is that the first time I went to Mexico, I nearly lost a client because they wanted to go out drinking for tequila. And I said, I don't like tequila. Dumbass, go out there, drink with them, have a cerveza, do something, that whole relationship I was about to blow because I heard drinking. I didn't think of what they really wanted. That was like my
Yeah.
first moment. So really, those are some of the three things that I would really be weary about before you go international.
Cool. And then got another one here. What does a realistic timeline look like for entering a new geography and seeing traction?
That's a tough question because it's not every organization and group is the same thing. What I tell everybody is depending on the business, it could take about 12 to 18 months to see some serious traction. But if you're selling something that needs in market approvals, like a pharmaceutical product or food, which needs testing or whatever, it might even be longer. And you have to be patient in that sense. So, that's a tough question, and there's no one answer. Each industry is just a little bit different. But if you're not willing to give it 12 to 18 months, don't do it.
Yeah. And you don't want to get stuck either.
No, 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 no.
Not
But
at all.
look, I'm talking right now, for example, with one health food company, and we found a loophole that we're able to get them approval in 6 months instead of 18 months. Huge, because they were going to go on the 18-month route. We got them in the 6-month route. So they'll start to see traction in late 2026. With the other products that have it, it'll only be in late 2027. That's the unfortunate situation.
Okay. Yeah. Takes a minute. All right. I like to close these off with some rapid fire questions that are
Go
fun.
for it,
All
Christy.
right. What is one metric you always look at first?
Ah, boy. From which perspective?
I think when it goes to, let's look at it for people that want to start getting into the exporting. What is the one key metric to look at?
The one key metric I want to look at is sales opportunity. Like if and not only sales, so I should say sales combined with the profit margin that we can make. If that number is somewhat evident,
Mhm.
then we're on the right track.
Perfect. What is the most underrated growth lever?
Ooh, the most underrated. That's a great question, and I would say the quality of the client. And what I mean by that is a lot of times we look at the sales number as the only gauge. Do we look at the quality, the profitability, and how quickly a client pays us? I think that tends to come from the finance department,
Mhm.
no, but not enough. I'm telling the finance people you need to scream that louder for us because that can make a huge
Yeah.
difference, to an organization.
Yeah, I would agree. What is one thing you remove from every founder's plate if you could?
The necessity to poke their fingers in everything, let us do the job.
Mhm.
Let us help you. We'll present you the findings. You don't have to get super involved. You will get involved in the right time.
Mhm. And then my last one is what's a book or idea that fundamentally changed how you approach your growth strategy today with clients?
Simon Sinek's Start with Why. I really am a fan of it. If you understand the why of your organization and your personal why, which is what I
Mhm.
discovered about 2 years ago, everybody will share that vision. Everybody will get the feel of what you want to do and how you want to accomplish it. And going back to the 11 players, they're all going to be aligned and ready to run with you.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, if people want to reach out to you to learn more how you might be able to help them, what is the best way to get in contact with you?
I'm available on LinkedIn, David Solomon 13 as my LinkedIn profile, SERO Growth, or info at serogrowth.com, SERO growth.com. Any which way, carrier pigeon, telex, fax machine, I don't care. However you want to reach me, I'm good to go.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. This has been fun.
Thanks, Christy. Really loved it. Thanks so much.